I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. Bill, Nancy Pelosi is racking the subpoena cannon, according to Mike Allen at Axios.com and a special show that Axios has on HBO. The Democrats in Congress are planning a subpoena palooza. This is my term, not theirs. But they did use the term subpoena cannon, according to one unnamed source. The people who have great courage, of course, are always the unnamed sources. And let me give you an idea of the kinds of things, Bill, that they expect to be subpoenaing people for. They want to check into President Trump's tax records. They want to check into the firings of both Jeff Sessions and James Comey. They want to check into the so-called Muslim ban. There are any number of topics here. Family separation policy at the border, classified information at Mar-a-Lago, administration dealings with North Korea and Saudi Arabia. But most of all, Bill, good old Tom Steyer, the liberal activist who put $100 million into funding efforts to get President Trump impeached, say that establishment Democrats who say that now is not the time are wrong, and that 80% of Democrats are with him, or perhaps even 80% of the country. Bill Whittle, we know that Democrats really don't have any power because they took over the House but didn't get the Senate and don't have the White House and don't control the Supreme Court, at least at this point. Why do they think that this will play well for them?
Well, because they're a bunch of echo chamber-bound idiots. If this guy actually thinks that 80% of the country agrees with him, he's out of his mind. And fewer people are going to agree with them when they're finished. I think this is going to rebound to Trump's benefit.
I just checked the quote. He said 80% of registered Democrats think he's right, that they should go for impeachment.
That number's getting smaller every day with the walkaway movement, and after Kavanaugh, I think it should be the runaway movement. But here's what I'd like to do with this one, Scott. Can you read me those alleged charges one by one, and I'll tell you why I'm not too worried about this?
Well, there's different layers of them, but let me see.
Just if you could just repeat the ones that you gave us.
Yes. Let me find the place in the story that has this. The firing of James Comey
and
Jeff Sessions.
They both serve at the pleasure of the president, correct?
My understanding, but I'm just reading the Constitution.
I know. I'm just reading the Constitution too. So that's a non-starter. It's well within. In fact, it's not only well within. It's one of the key powers granted to the executive branch that people like that, cabinet members, serve at the pleasure of the president. So they've got nothing there. Nothing. Donald Trump can fire them any damn time he wants to. Next.
The so-called Muslim travel ban, which of course was banned. They banned the travel ban.
They did not ban Muslims. They banned temporarily people from certain countries with a high terror risk. Other Muslims were allowed into the country during this time. Next question.
Next question. Family separation policy at the border, also repealed.
Well, if you don't want to have your family separated, maybe you shouldn't try to sneak them into somebody else's country illegally. That would be my first answer. We saw the dog cages that the Obama administration put people in. So if you're going to try and tell me that this is something new, unique to Donald Trump, and one of high crimes and misdemeanors or whatever is necessary, it is a continuation of ongoing U.S. policy. So they got nothing there. Next.
These seem kind of vague to me, but just administration dealings with North Korea and Saudi Arabia.
Oh, okay. So we perhaps have a nuclear deal with North Korea where we didn't have one before. We had a rogue nuclear power whose nuclear arsenal was improving in size dramatically, as was its reliability. Donald Trump does something that no American president had done prior to him. Went over there, shook hands with the guy, made him feel good, and they appear to be on the road towards a negotiated, at least a hold, if not a dismantling of their nuclear program. So. That's a win that none of the Democrats or any previous Republicans have accomplished either. Saudi Arabia is a little bit dicier, but I don't see where there's. Only reason I say Saudi Arabia is dicier is because you don't have this big cherry pie of achievement on it the way you have North Korea. But certainly there's nothing that's been that I'm aware of.
I'm assuming they're referring to the Khashoggi killings.
If Nancy Pelosi can prove that Donald Trump actually murdered that journalist, then Trump is in some trouble. But if it wasn't him, and especially if it wasn't the CIA, then I don't think they've got anything. What are we supposed to do? Are we just supposed to pretend that they're not there? He said, well, I don't know what the deal was, $5 billion, $11 billion or something in arms. We don't know who caused it. We don't know who did it. We don't know We don't know what part of the Saudi government was involved and what part wasn't. And if he says, well, if we take this $11 billion or whatever it is off the table, they're just going to buy it from China, he's right. We're not responsible for other countries' moral behavior. And we certainly didn't condone it, and we certainly didn't celebrate it. So next.
Hurricane relief in Puerto Rico.
Oh, for God's sake.
And not to mention throwing a roll of paper towels to somebody in the audience. Of course, I'm sure that they'll subpoena several about that.
Listen, of all the charges on the table, hurricane relief to Puerto Rico, I think is the one that it's the only one. Again, you didn't mention that in the opening, by the way, but it doesn't carry any substance. There's no way Donald Trump's going to be impeached or no one is. Here's what's going, Scott. No one is going to be able to produce a tape where the president, Donald Trump, says, these hurricane relief efforts in Puerto Rico, slow them down a little bit. Just slow them down a little bit. We don't really like those people. They're not really our color. Just kind of, I'm not saying don't help them. I'm just saying, take the long route there. If they're not going to find Donald Trump saying that. So now we're down to a question of FEMA incompetence. And after what they did with New Orleans, that wasn't very impressive. Although I don't want to be completely bad-mouthing FEMA. They've done some amazing work as well. Next.
Yeah, it's a fascinating business. I don't know how many of us really think we know how to do hurricane relief, but in any case, some people are critical of it.
However, the what was the name of that Navy? Was it when they had the
Cajun
floods?
Navy?
The Cajun Navy, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what. It's tempting to say, well, American people don't know how to handle a big emergency like that. As far as I could see during the flooding in Texas, it was private American citizens putting their boats on a trailer and driving 800 miles to launch into the water and rescue people they've never met, of all different colors, can you only imagine, coming from the South. So the idea that somehow FEMA does something magical is it's not accurate. I'm praising FEMA for the work they do. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but FEMA works because the American people work, and the more we get the American people involved, the better I like it. So next.
So this one is kind of a big one, and maybe we ought to bring it to a close on this one. But the new House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff from your backyard in California.
Hooray.
Is planning to look into how much influence Vladimir Putin may have had over President Trump. In addition to that, he plans to release a lot of transcripts of interviews that the House has done over the last year or so to Robert Mueller, the special counsel who's investigating Russia, so that they can look for people who might have perjured themselves.
I want to talk about his tax returns because you mentioned that in the beginning, and then we'll come back to this one.
Okay.
Do you want to ask me about that?
Yes.
Because this one I don't know. I think I might have heard this from you. Isn't it true that any impeachable offense as president has to occur while he's in office?
Well, that's part of the debate. Yes, some people have said it's got to be for an infraction that occurred while he was sitting president. But it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to impeach him on this, but that they could still probe this issue,
Okay.
And they could still make a stink about it.
So they're going to make us think about it anyway. And I maintain that the more of these fires that they light or attempt to light with their soggy matches, and the more of them that they attempt to light that don't actually catch fire and burn, the more they're going to look like the arsonists that they really are. Now, as far as the Russia collusion thing goes, it's going to take a pretty bold person to allege that Donald Trump has closer ties financially, emotionally, diplomatically, commercially than Hillary Clinton does. Hillary Clinton was given a direct reward as Secretary of State for selling Russia 1/4 of our uranium supplies. So if they want to dig deeply into that, then they can. And here's the thing about Russia, Scott. The sanctions that Donald Trump has imposed on Russia are harsher than the ones that were there in place before he got there. The United States military is building up its military when Barack Obama was tearing it down. ISIS and the Russians in the Middle East were rampant, and then 2 days later, Donald Trump not only shut the door on ISIS, you don't hear a whole lot about the Russians in the Middle East either. So if you're really trying to tell me that Donald Trump is easier on the Russians than Hillary reset Clinton, I don't buy it. And I don't think there's any evidence for any of this stuff. So there you go. They're going to launch their canon of subpoenas, and canon of subpoenas, is that what they called it?
Yes, it's kind of like one of those T-shirt cannons at a ball game is the way they see it.
Ah. Well, I will reply with a cannon of our own. It's a single cannon, and it's an older looking cannon, and it's horizontal, and it says, "Come and take it."
Well, I guess perhaps the only sad thing about this is that these hearings, which no doubt will be broadcast on C-SPAN, will have very low audience numbers because people have jobs now and they don't have time to watch hearings on TV.
Yeah, Republicans don't anyway.
Ladies and gentlemen, well, even Democrats, that's the great thing about
I suppose there are some working
economy.
Democrats.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Whittle comes to you 5 days a week with his thoughts on current events here on Bill Whittle Now. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.